The Pompeii tourist death. In May 2018, millions of tourists were visiting the ancient ruins of Pompeii, one of Italy's most famous archaeological sites. The city, frozen in time by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, attracts visitors from all over the world who come to walk through its ancient streets and explore the remains of Roman life. Among the visitors that day was Raphael Bruns, a 23-year-old tourist from Germany. Like many tourists, Bruns wandered through the ruins taking photos and exploring different parts of the site. At some point during his visit, he moved into an area that was restricted to the public, climbing onto one of the ancient structures. The stone walls of Pompeii are nearly 2,000 years old, and many areas are unstable. For that reason, certain sections of the ruins are closed off to visitors. But Bruns climbed over the barrier and began walking along the ancient masonry. Moments later, he lost his footing. He slipped and fell from the structure, dropping several meters onto the ground below. As he fell, part of the ancient wall above him shifted. A large block of stone broke loose and collapsed down onto him. Other tourists nearby quickly called for help as park staff rushed to the scene. Emergency responders arrived shortly afterward, but the impact had been catastrophic. The stone had crushed him instantly. Raphael Bruns died at the scene, becoming the first tourist in years to die inside the ruins of Pompeii. The accident sparked renewed discussions about tourists entering restricted areas and the dangers of climbing on structures that had been standing for nearly 2,000 years. The Selfie cliff death. In August 2014, the dramatic cliffs of Cabo da Roca in Portugal were packed with visitors. The location is famous for being the westernmost point of mainland Europe, where steep cliffs drop more than 80 meters straight into the Atlantic Ocean. Tourists from around the world come to the site for the view. The cliffs offer spectacular scenery, but they are also extremely dangerous. Among the visitors that day was a Polish couple traveling with their 2 young children. Like many tourists, they wanted a photo with the ocean stretching out behind them. The couple walked toward the edge of the cliffs, passing the safety barriers placed there to keep visitors away from the drop. Witnesses later said they were trying to take a selfie together with the ocean in the background. As they positioned themselves near the edge, something went wrong. One of them lost their balance. In a matter of seconds, both adults slipped and fell over the edge of the cliff. They plunged more than 80 meters down onto the rocks below, disappearing from sight. Other visitors rushed to the edge in shock as the couple's 2 children, who had been standing nearby, watched the fall happen. Rescue teams were called immediately, but the drop had been far too high. Both tourists were pronounced dead after the fall, leaving their children behind at the scene. The Yellowstone hot spring death. In June 2016, Yellowstone National Park in the United States was entering the peak of its summer tourist season. Millions of visitors come to Yellowstone every year to see its geysers, colorful hot springs, and volcanic landscapes. But the park sits on top of a massive geothermal system. Beneath the ground, boiling water and acidic chemicals circulate through underground chambers, creating pools that can reach temperatures above 90 degrees Celsius or 194 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of this, visitors are required to stay on marked trails and boardwalks. On June 7, 2016, a 23-year-old tourist named Colin Nathaniel Scott left the designated path with his sister near an area known as Norris Geyser Basin. Scott was reportedly searching for a place where he could soak in one of the hot springs, something strictly forbidden in the park. As the two walked across the fragile ground near the thermal pools, Scott stepped too close to the edge of one of the springs. The thin crust beneath his feet suddenly gave way. He slipped and fell directly into the boiling water. His sister watched helplessly as he struggled for only a few moments before disappearing beneath the surface. Rangers were called immediately, but the conditions of the pool made recovery extremely dangerous. When officials returned the next day to retrieve the body, the extreme heat and acidity of the water had already begun dissolving the remains. By the time recovery teams arrived, almost nothing was left. The frozen waterfall death. In February 2017, Iceland had become one of the most popular destinations for adventure tourism. Thousands of visitors traveled there every winter to see glaciers, volcanic landscapes, and frozen waterfalls. One of those visitors was Thomas McBride, a tourist from the United Kingdom who had come to explore the country's famous natural landmarks. During his trip, McBride visited a remote waterfall that had completely frozen over during the winter. The thick ice covering the cascade created a spectacular natural formation that many tourists stopped to photograph. Despite warning signs advising visitors to keep a safe distance, McBride decided to climb onto the frozen surface of the waterfall to get a better picture. At first, the ice appeared solid, but frozen waterfalls are extremely unstable. Beneath the outer layer of ice, water continues to flow, slowly weakening the structure. As McBride moved further onto the ice, a section suddenly cracked beneath his weight. The frozen surface gave way. He slipped and fell down the steep cascade, sliding violently over the jagged ice and rocks below. Other tourists nearby immediately called emergency services, but the location was remote and difficult for rescue teams to reach quickly. When rescuers finally arrived, Thomas McBride had already died from the injuries sustained during the fall. The paragliding tourist crash. In June 2018, the Swiss Alps were filled with tourists eager to experience one of the region's most popular activities, tandem paragliding. From high mountain launch points, visitors could run off a steep slope attached to a professional pilot and glide silently over valleys, lakes, and small alpine villages thousands of feet below. Among the tourists that day was Tijana Radonjic, a young visitor from Serbia who had signed up for a tandem paragliding flight during her vacation. The process was simple. The passenger would be secured to the pilot with a harness system, and once the parachute caught the wind, the pair would lift into the air. Shortly after takeoff, however, something went terribly wrong. Video from the flight later showed that Radonjic had not been properly secured to the harness before the launch. Within seconds of leaving the ground, she realized she was not attached correctly. Instead of sitting safely in the harness, she was hanging only by her hands, gripping the pilot's equipment as the paraglider climbed higher. The pilot quickly understood the situation and tried to hold onto her while maneuvering the glider, but they were already hundreds of meters above the ground. For nearly 2 minutes, Radonjic struggled to keep her grip as the glider drifted through the air, but the effort was impossible to maintain. Her hands finally slipped. She fell from the paraglider, dropping hundreds of meters onto the mountainside below. Rescue teams were called immediately, but the fall had been unsurvivable. What was supposed to be a peaceful flight over the Alps instead became a fatal mistake caused by a harness that had never been secured. The statue climbing death. In 2019, thousands of tourists were visiting Rio de Janeiro's most famous landmark, the towering statue of Christ the Redeemer, known in Portuguese as Cristo Redentor. Standing more than 30 meters tall on top of Corcovado Mountain, the statue attracts millions of visitors every year. Tourists crowd the viewing platforms around its base to take photos with the massive monument and the sweeping views of Rio below. Among the visitors that day was a tourist who had decided that the normal viewing area wasn't enough. Instead of staying behind the barriers like everyone else, he climbed over a restricted section and began making his way higher up onto part of the statue's structure. From there, the view was even more dramatic. The city stretched out below, and the massive arms of the statue extended over the mountain. Witnesses said the man appeared to be trying to take a photo from a much more extreme position, but the surface of the monument is smooth stone, and the structure was never designed for people to climb. At some point while moving along the statue, he lost his footing. With nothing to grab onto, the tourist slipped. He fell from the structure and dropped down the steep slope below the statue. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but the fall had been far too high for anyone to survive. A place known for breathtaking views had suddenly become the scene of a fatal accident caused by a single risky decision. The cable car fall. In September 2017, the mountains of Switzerland were filled with tourists enjoying the late summer season. Cable cars carried visitors high above the valleys, offering spectacular views of glaciers, forests, and alpine villages. One of the stops along a popular mountain route featured an observation platform next to a cable car station. From there, tourists could look straight down into the valley hundreds of meters below. Among the visitors that day was a 26-year-old tourist from Germany who had come to the area with friends. Like many others, he stepped toward the edge of the viewing platform to take photos of the landscape. The platform was protected by railings, but several witnesses later said the man leaned far over the barrier while trying to get a better angle for a picture. Mountain winds can change quickly at that altitude. As he leaned forward, he suddenly lost his balance. Before anyone nearby could react, the tourist tipped over the railing and disappeared from the platform. He fell hundreds of meters down the steep mountainside below. Rescue helicopters were dispatched almost immediately, but the terrain made recovery extremely difficult. When rescuers reached the location of the fall, it quickly became clear that the accident had been unsurvivable. In a place known for breathtaking views, a single step too far had ended in tragedy. The Waterfall Edge Death. In July 2019, one of Norway's most famous natural landmarks, Vuringsfossen Waterfall, was packed with tourists. The waterfall plunges more than 180 meters into a narrow canyon, making it one of the most dramatic sights in the country. Visitors travel from around the world to stand on the viewing platforms and watch the enormous cascade crashing into the gorge below. The rocks surrounding the waterfall, however, are often extremely wet and slippery because of the constant mist rising from the falling water. That afternoon, a tourist from Asia had walked closer to the edge of the canyon while exploring the viewing area. Witnesses later said he moved beyond the safer sections of the path in order to get a better photograph of the waterfall. The closer he got to the edge, the more dangerous the terrain became. As he stepped onto the smooth rock surface near the cliff, his foot suddenly slipped. He lost his balance and slid toward the edge of the canyon. Within seconds, the tourist disappeared over the cliff. He fell more than 180 meters down into the gorge below, where the powerful river rushed through the narrow valley. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, but the depth of the canyon and the force of the waterfall made recovery extremely difficult. What had begun as a peaceful stop to admire one of Norway's most famous views ended with a fall that no one could survive. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and help boost the video. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you soon. Bye.